Welcome to the Absolute Truth on this Monday. I'm glad to be back in the seat after a week off, getting some much needed rest and relaxation and spending time with family. I'm very thankful to my cohort, Brandon Weichert, for filling in for me. He did a great job. There's lots of truth to get to on this Monday, starting with recovery efforts in Texas, which continue this morning in the wake of devastating flooding in the Hill Country in that state. This footage and images were taken by our good friend and seasoned war correspondent, Lara Logan, who lives not too far from where the flooding occurred. Now, the images that you're seeing coming out of Texas look very eerily similar to those from Western North Carolina from last year, where the Appalachian region of North Carolina is still struggling to recover and rebuild. Sean Hendricks of Operation Shelter was central to the grassroots effort to assist the people of Western North Carolina, providing coverage in the lack of government response in that region. And Sean Hendrick joins us now to talk about what we're seeing out of Texas. Sean, my friend, it's good to see you as always. Unfortunately, we only see each other, it seems, when we have tragedies like these occurring. Tell us what you're learning from people you're talking to on the ground in Texas this morning.
Well, from what I can tell, it's very similar. Hill country, tons of rain, rapid rising of water, huge walls of water that are hitting areas. I mean, is it historic? I mean, it's happened before, like in '86. Even with Hurricane Helene, we'd seen flooding in the past. But again, it's just how quick it happened, and it feels like it kind of came out of nowhere. I know there were some warnings that were given out, but this was a lot of rain very quickly. I do see, though, I feel like the emergency management in Texas is on top of it. I don't see such a like day one where we didn't have anything, right? There was just no resources. It looks like they're getting the help and support they need. It's like we're seeing the actual departments doing the work versus like spontaneous volunteers like myself for Hurricane Helene, where it's the fire departments doing the work they're set up for. So hopefully they're not experiencing the kind of the regional outage that we did with Hurricane Helene, and you can get resources into the area. That was our biggest issue: is the roads got washed out, the fiber got washed out. You couldn't get into the disaster zone, and it doesn't seem to be the case. I think Nick Soder got in much easier than when he got into Hurricane Helene. He was there pretty rapidly.
Yeah. What I've also noticed is that there was good air coverage, right? I'm seeing a lot of footage out of helicopters conducting rescue and recovery missions. In fact, in my 2:30 edition of The Absolute Truth, we're going to talk with one of those helicopter pilots who's going to take a quick break just to give us an update from the effort there, what he's seeing, what he's doing. So be sure to tune in at 2:30 for that. But that's something that we lacked in Western North Carolina. So it was very reassuring for me to see that those kind of resources were already on the ground almost immediately.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference is we knew what was going on immediately. With Hurricane Helene, it was such a mystery because there was no one there. No one could get in. And I think that's the big difference. This is a tragic situation in Texas, but the regional resources are able to mobilize to help where we got cut off in Western North Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. As you noted, this is not exactly unprecedented in the region. In fact, the Camp Mystic that a lot of the news is focused on, it's a camp for girls, young girls. Several of them, I think, to this moment remain missing, though there was a large evacuation effort. There's question as to why it didn't happen maybe a little bit sooner. There's some headlines suggesting that they had noticed, so might could have evacuated. But that has happened there in the past. Of course, there's a lot of these stories, and I'm sure we'll be breaking down more of this in coming days. There's concerns about cloud seeding, weather modification. We talked about that a little bit in Western North Carolina, but right now I think the focus is largely on the recovery effort instead of how this might have happened. Correct, Sean?
Yeah, I mean, we see the same thing. Us that were in Western North Carolina are too busy helping people to try to worry about any kind of theories of what happened. But when you're sitting outside the state looking in, it's hard not to start looking at, hey, what could cause this? Because that's all you can do. You're not there on the ground. You can't help. And I get it. But like you said, right now, recovery is the number one priority. But I think the biggest issue with the theories is that they kind of go black or white. There's a whole group that says, oh, weather modification's not real. You're a conspiracy theorist. Stop. Then the other side says every storm that happens is a weather weapon. They're trying to kill us all, right? I think the truth is in the middle. We don't know enough about. We know that weather modification exists. There's a company that does it called Rainmaker in Texas. Now, am I saying that's what caused this? No. What I'm saying is we don't know enough about it to make a decision, but it's worth looking into. Like even like atomic testing back in the 50s, we didn't know enough about it. People see the mushroom clouds go off outside of Vegas and like, oh, cool, a new test, free energy and security. Same with cloud seeding. I don't know that we have enough information to be doing it and understanding what the ramifications are. Even the big floods in Dubai were caused by cloud seeding. So we know what happens. So we can stop kind of arguing that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is very focused on this issue from the congressional level and looking to push legislation. We're going to try to catch up with her soon to talk more about that. And then our own Christy Lee is going to do a deeper dive with this with an expert in the field tomorrow evening at 9 p.m. right here on Lindell TV. Let's talk about what's happening in Western North Carolina. I actually was talking to people from Banner Elk, that's Avery County, North Carolina, last week. While I was off, I was actually around a lot of North Carolinians, and they were telling me that there is so much work yet to be done in Western North Carolina. There's still roads out. They were telling me of one road I know in particular that is just still one side of it's out, and it was already a very hairy road. It's one of those that I like to avoid taking when I lived in North Carolina. Now it's even scarier, but there's so much effort. There's still so much work to be done there, correct? And from what I understand, tourism is still lacking because people kind of think they can't go there, but you can. There's enough infrastructure there for that. It's still a wonderful place to go. But give us an update on Western North Carolina, if you would, Sean.
Well, it's the death by a thousand paper cuts right now, right? It's all the details to get finished. We're building a house for Christine, right? We got our permits, everything looked good. Well, they come out and say, hey, this septic system is actually not on your property line anymore. The new rules for septic systems say this, this, and this. So now we're worried we can't even get the size of house we want on that property because there's new rules in place. So it's just like every time you make one step forward, you take two steps back. Even on the road repairs, you get these roads repaired and it still rains up there. I-40, my daughter was off at church camp and they were supposed to go rafting up in Western North Carolina from Tennessee, but the I-40 got washed out. So they went tubing in Tennessee somewhere, lost tourism for Western North Carolina because of a rainstorm that had nothing to do with Hurricane Helene, still took out I-40. So the infrastructure is still very fragile up there, and it's going to be for a very long time.
What can people do? What do we need to be asking for, whether it's Western North Carolina or Texas? Because a lot of people sit here, we see the news, and of course it is our natural inclination for many Americans to get out there and help or to provide some kind of assistance. What would you recommend at this point for first Texas, because that's what we're focused on today, but also Western North Carolina?
It's going to be the rebuild, right? A lot of these camps, try to give as close to the problem as possible. Try to give, like, let's say Camp Mystic, we know that name. Try to give to Camp Mystic to rebuild. Try to skip Red Cross. Try to skip the big charities that come in for a few weeks, raise a ton of money, and leave. Give to local charities that are going to stay boots on the ground. That's why we're not in Texas. We're focused on North Carolina. We're trying to build houses. We can't just up and leave. And trust me, you want to go help, but we're still building houses in West North. We can't pull everything away. Now we had leftover supplies that are for the early days that are being sent out there. So a lot of resource sharing is happening, but find local charities that are verified and give money to that. Every week we're needing money for screws, drywall, electrical wire. Just all this stuff is so expensive to rebuild, and the money has gone to a trickle. In Texas, a bunch of money will come in, and then the next big news story will happen, or disaster, and all the money will just cut off. And it'll just be scraping to get every dollar you need to continue to rebuild all these lives. And my guess is flood insurance is going to be an issue in this area as well, just like it was for us.
I think you're right. Look, I am encouraged by conversations I had last week that the message to give to as local as you can, which you just laid out why it's so important. I think that message is getting out there because I was talking to a lady who's from a metropolitan area in North Carolina. Our kids have started playing together on the beach, and somehow we just got to talking about the Western North Carolina flooding, and she was in Charlotte. And she said, look, I have directed that my company matches what I get And she said, I have directed that it goes to this local, it was Beloved. And I think you share some of their information on your
Yes.
X too. She was directing that her dollars and her match directly goes there instead of some of these bigger nonprofits that are well known, because she wanted to make sure that her dollars were actually going to help. So obviously the message is getting out there, Sean, and that's really great. Look, we appreciate you jumping on with us. We want to not forget about North Carolina, and that especially became important to me as I talked to people living there last week. There's still so much to be done, and one of the greatest ways you can support there is by supporting with your tourism. Go visit the area. It's beautiful. Yep. Lots of great hiking to be done. Lots of great food available. So that's a great way, and I still have to get my trip scheduled down there. It's good to see you, Sean Hendricks. Anything else we should know before we close out with you?
Yeah, we're experiencing historic flooding in central North Carolina right now as we speak.
I drove through it last night.
Chapel Hill just broke the 1996 Hurricane Fran record on the Eno Creek. It's the sign that said this is Fran's flood height is now going underwater. So unfortunately, we're experiencing historic flooding today, and it's running all downriver through the Tar and through the Neuse and all the other rivers that run out into the ocean. Mm-hmm. So we're in a flood situation in central and eastern North Carolina at this moment. So we just got to kind of stand by because the floodwaters haven't even receded yet. So we're still kind of get a grasp of what's actually going on here.
Yeah, we'll keep our eye on that region. Ironically, I was driving through that last night. I was a little bit ahead of the flooding, but it was a hairy drive back to Virginia. And I was right in that Pinehurst region, traveling up.
Oh, yeah.
I tried to take that route instead of 95, and I'm not sure that was the best route to take. Nope. It was a little bit of a scary drive, but God kept us safe, and we're very thankful for that. And we'll thank you for mentioning that. We'll keep our eye on that as well. Thank you so much, Sean Hendricks. It's good to see you again.
Have a good one. Thank you.
National tragedy, and the administration is treating it as such. We know the National Weather Service provided early and consistent warnings. They gave out timely flash flood alerts. There were record-breaking lead times in the lead up to this catastrophe. There is ongoing flood monitoring, and these offices were well staffed. In fact, one of the offices was actually overstaffed. They had more people than they need. So any claim to the contrary is completely false, and it's just sad that people are pushing these lies.
That was White House Press Secretary earlier today in the White House press briefing, Karoline Leavitt, pushing back on narratives perpetuated in the corporate media related to the Trump administration, particularly President Trump's response to the Texas flooding, while announcing a forthcoming trip to Texas that the president will take. Karoline Leavitt said that the president signed an emergency disaster declaration within hours of the crisis. She also said that the president deployed the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, to the ground, while she did say again that the president will personally visit the hardest hit areas later this week. Leavitt also saying that now is a time for unity, not partisan lies. It's very different from the response we saw to Hurricane Helene by the previous Biden administration. In fact, recovery efforts continue as we speak. They're in full force in Kerr County, Texas. The DPS there announcing that along with their partners from several agencies that includes DPW, they're coming through debris and damage. Also, as we saw in Western North Carolina, many citizen volunteers are taking to Texas to help with the effort. One such hero is Gary Haven. Gary and his wife, Diane, flew search and rescue missions with their helicopter in the mountains of North Carolina in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, and they're doing the same right now in Texas. And we're so pleased that Gary took the time away to join us now to give us a firsthand view of what he's seeing in Texas and how that is different from the response he saw in Western North Carolina. It's good to see you, Gary. What is your initial takeaways or your initial reaction to the response that you're actually a part of now in Texas?
Hi, I'm glad to be here to share this with you. We've had a very interesting last couple of days. This event in Texas was a once in 100-year event. And of course, it happened at 4 o'clock in the morning, where the Guadalupe River went from 3 feet to 29 feet in 45 minutes while everyone was asleep. That was the nature of it. On the 4th of July, you have thousands of people that are down on the riverbank in campers and tents. So they were the most vulnerable. It was the worst time of day, and there really wasn't any way to prevent it, in my opinion. And you know, I hate to say it this way, but stuff happens. Now, it's my great privilege. I work with a volunteer organization called OperationHelo.org, and they organize private pilots like me to come to disasters like this. For example, down in Kerrville, the government is handling it with 11 helicopters to cover 50 miles. They need 100 helicopters there. But we weren't invited, so we went to the second hardest hit area, which is Marble Falls, Texas. These are pictures of me flying over this disaster. We didn't have near the number of people that were missing, but we did have a significant number. So we spent the last 2 days looking to hopefully find them alive. That picture there is the Jeep of the fire chief. You can barely see that it's a Jeep. I personally dropped National Guard with shovels and picks, and it took them half the day to get to the cab to verify that he was not in it. Here I'm dropping off volunteers. In fact, I believe these fire department, and they're about to go to the banks and work through the debris on about a 10-mile stretch. It is brutal work. But it's the only way it can be done. And helicopters were the only way to get to people there because all the bridges have been washed out.
Well, it's what we saw in North Carolina. Now, I remember initially in Western North Carolina, there was a shortage of helicopters because the government wasn't responding. Is that, or correct me if I'm wrong, but as I recall, that was the issue. So you had people like your group step in the gap and conduct those missions. How different is that to what you're seeing regarding the government response in Texas?
It's considerably different. Now I have one complaint. Okay. This Operation Helo is available to send 50, 100 helicopters, people like me,
wow,
to Kerr County, which is where they're needed. But because there's 11 military helicopters operating, they won't let us in the area. That's foolish. It's bureaucratic. But having said that, Trump has been all over this. He sent Kristi Noem there immediately. There's been no bureaucratic and bottlenecks of any resources. He's done a really good job. And if you compare that to the Biden response, we had 100 helicopters in North Carolina. We had a hangar full of food that just kept filling up, water, food, medicine. And we had an ops center, so everybody knew where to go and what to do. And we were the only lifeline because all the roads in the mountains of North Carolina had been washed out. So anybody that had a medical condition like dialysis, we were able to get them and bring them back in an orderly fashion. Elon Musk donated Starlinks. We were putting them in all the fire stations that were isolated so communities had communication. It was a thing of beauty until FEMA showed up late in the week. The first thing they did, they confiscated the Starlinks and decided they were going to divvy them out. They confiscated the food that was donated by private citizens and decided they were going to divvy that out. And the reason was they had no resources, so they claimed ours so that they could look like they were doing something. So you have a complete 180-degree response from the Biden administration and their response to disaster and the Trump administration. And I'm not surprised that Trump, as an entrepreneur, would understand how to get things done.
I'm so glad to hear that there's a completely different expediency in the response from the current government, because I have many friends and family in the Western North Carolina region, and it was heartbreaking. I mean, it felt daunting to know that people were there in need of help, and not only were they not able to get it, but that the federal government was actively putting barriers in place to try to stop them from getting help from the volunteers. And we were talking to the many volunteers on the ground. I mean, regular people were just trying to figure out how to get resources in to help these people. I would have neighbors asking me how to help the people there because they knew I knew people there, and I knew people who could get, trailers in their campers. And it was a completely different situation. So I'm glad to hear this. So where does that put us now, Gary, in the recovery effort? Are we still in rescue? Are there still people out there needing to be rescued, or are we now just recovery? And how quickly are we going to get to rebuild from this disaster?
Unfortunately, at this point, it would be a miracle if it was a rescue.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm a believer in miracles, so we may be happily surprised. Recovering bodies is where we're at right now. The death toll in the Kerrville area is 82. Last time I got to look at it, 27 of them are children, and about 10 children are still missing, which is such a terrible tragedy. So they're going to have to have people on the riverbanks and helicopters going over the water looking for bodies. With the small amount of government air support right now, it's going to take a month. If they were to allow private helicopters to come in and work with them, it could be done in a week. So I'm actually reaching out to people in government that I know to cut the bureaucracy, get us in there, so that we can do what you're seeing on the screen here. And this is a 55-mile long corridor that the Guadalupe River has flooded and drowned people. Up north, where I've been working in the Marble Falls area, I'll share one story with you because the end of the story happened about 2 hours ago. A 17-year-old girl that was washed out of her car with the rest of her family members. They got out, and she unfortunately was washed downstream. Yesterday, I flew the father and the 16-year-old brother. And imagine they're in the backseat of my helicopter, and we're looking for the body of their daughter and sister. I tell you, it was tough holding that together. And you're flying along low and slow, and you're looking as closely as you can. And in one way, you don't want to find her body. And anyway, it was tough. And 2 hours ago, maybe 3 hours ago, they found her body. And so, unfortunately, if stories like that being repeated all over Central Texas right now, it is a terrible, terrible tragedy. And for me, especially with so many children involved.
That is absolutely heart-wrenching. We'll keep that family in our prayers. There are still, as you said, 10 children missing. We will continue to pray for a miracle. But of course, the sooner you get that air support to be looking, the longer time goes on, the shorter the rope gets for that miracle. So we need to get that air support in there. I want to know who specifically in government can make the call to cut through the bureaucratic tape. Who does the public pressure need to be put on, Gary, to help you all out with that?
It's really at a state level. You have the DPS and their helicopters. You have the Parks and Wildlife, and they have a concern being in the vicinity of private aircraft. But this Operation Hilo that I work with, that's what they do. We've done probably more search and rescue than the government's done. We know how to communicate, coordinate. We share at Ops Center. And again, there's 11 military helicopters working a 55-mile area that's silly. So state reps, state senators, I'm friends with a number of people in state government. I've been reaching out to them. So if everybody in Texas could contact their people in state government and say, get the private helicopters there. Let's get this done in a week, not a month.
Yeah, everyone who can, contact your representative to try to help Operation Hilo. Get the air support in there to help with, this public-private partnership, if you want to put it that way, so that we can perhaps save some people. We're still praying for miracles, as I just said, but at least complete the recovery effort in a more expeditious manner so these families can get answers and closures and we can move to rebuild. Gary, I'm so impressed with what you all do. I was so thankful when our good friend Michael Yan, who was on earlier, put us in touch. Not only have you helped out in these situations, but I do want to commend you for some of your other efforts. That includes helping out with January 6 prisoners, who many of them just were suddenly released, right? You all helped to organize an Operation Airlift, and you helped to fly dozens of freed prisoners, freed J6 prisoners, to their home communities when they came out and they had no resources. I mean, people don't understand what it's like to be let out. And we've talked to a lot of them on this show and on this network right here at Lindell TV. Talk about that. Talk about that situation you helped out with just a little bit before we run out of time.
We knew that the president was very likely to pardon all the J6 prisoners. We just didn't know when. And so I worked with a number of J6 organizations that had what they called ambassadors. And these were people that were going to be at the gates of every prison that evening. And these prisons there were 75 of them spread over 35 states with about 300 prisoners to be released. And many of them, my son, for example, was at Leavenworth. It was 4 below zero. And they were going to let these people out on the street. I actually picked up people that were wearing shorts, and they were in places like Illinois. No phone, no money. And so these ambassadors would be there, make sure they were warm and safe and had a hotel room. And then we got them transportation if they were close. If they were far away, I called friends of mine that have jets like I do, and we created Operation Airlift, and we flew dozens of these prisoners to their homes. I personally, in my aircraft, over 2.5 days, flew 8,500 miles, which is 1/3 around the world. Getting them home. And my wife was kind of the flight attendant. And so she was there talking to these almost all men who had been incarcerated, many of them for 4 years. They hadn't seen their children, their wives. She videoed a number of these little children, daddy, and they didn't know who their father was, these victims. And it was an extraordinary experience. I'll be happy to send you some of that video if you like. And do you know that we got hate mail on Facebook? People said, "We hope your plane goes down." It was an amazing experience. These were heroes that were standing up and exercising their right to redress, who were horribly abused by a federal government. Trump, thank God he's there. And by the way, I'm friends with Mike Lindell. Mike has been a force for good across this thing. And so we're winning now.
Yeah. Gary, it's so inspiring to talk with you. Your wife, Diane, Mike Lindell, you exemplify the best of the American spirit and heroism. I would love to share that footage with my audience sometime. In the meantime, let's hope your appeals to government official reaches someone's ears who will help so we can expedite this recovery effort. Thank you so much. And if you saw on the title there, our audience might be scratching their heads, co-founder of Curves. So that is Gary's history. He and his wife co-founded Curves, which many of us ladies know well, that workout chain that you would see everywhere. So you guys are very impressive people. Thank you so much for joining us, because I know you're busy working on this effort. So we really appreciate you taking the time to share this information with our audience, because they can help in putting pressure on the bureaucracy to cut the tape. Thank you so much, Gary.
Thank you, Emerald.
Swollen limbs, joint pain, inflammation, skin aging, and cognitive decline. These are just a few of the awful side effects that you can experience due to poor blood circulation. And popping ibuprofen is not a solution to the pain. It's only temporary relief, and it's only masking the true problem, which is inflammation. Researchers are saying to add this Antarctic super nutrient to your diet. I'm talking about omega-3 fatty acids, but not just any form of omegas. These particular omega-3 fatty acids are sourced from wild-caught krill. Has been shown to support healthy blood pressure, circulation, brain health, as well as reduce inflammation, swelling, and joint pain. For a limited time, you can grab Native Path Antarctic Krill Oil for up to 66% off plus free shipping. Just go to getkrill.com/Lindell right now to get your special offer.
A bit of chaos in MAGA world on this Monday as Alec Eisenstadt, a quote-unquote reporter at Axios, a staple of Washington, D.C.'s media complex, reports that the FBI and Department of Justice have found that there was no Jeffrey Epstein client list. Now, according to this report in Axios, they've obtained a copy of a joint DOJ-FBI statement on the matter, which reads, quote, "This systematic review revealed no incriminating client lists. There was also no credible evidence found that Epstein blackmailed prominent individuals as part of his actions." They say the memo says, quote, "We did not uncover evidence that could predicate an investigation against uncharged third parties." Document further states that, quote, "After a thorough investigation, FBI investigators concluded that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center in New York City on August the 10th, 2019. This conclusion is consistent with previous findings, including the August 19th, 2019 autopsy findings of the New York City Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, the November 2019 position of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York in connection with the investigation of federal correctional officers responsible for guarding Epstein, and the June 2023 conclusions of DOJ's Office of the Inspector General. Now, this contradicts everything that MAGA has been arguing in the press for years, especially former MAGA influencers like the current FBI Director Kash Patel, his deputy, his number two, Dan Bongino, and current Attorney General Pam Bondi. The FBI also released over 10 hours of footage from the security cameras at the prison facility where Jeffrey Epstein allegedly killed himself. They show no one entering Epstein's prison cell, as has been claimed for years online. But of course, the FBI themselves reported that the closed cameras monitoring Epstein's cell had been lost due to undisclosed quote-unquote technical errors immediately following Epstein's death at that prison, as per this old archived BBC report. I remember reporting on that when I was at Newsmax. So lest we forget, also, Attorney General Bondi herself said repeatedly in her many Fox News hits that she has seen all the Epstein files, and there was much gruesome detail there. Listen.
Tens of thousands of videos of Epstein with children or child porn, and there are hundreds of victims, and no one victim will ever get released. It's just the volume, and that's what they're going through right now. The FBI is diligently.
Our friends at Rasmussen Reports insist this is fake news from Axios. We certainly hope so, because we think there needs to be accountability for Epstein. They tweeted earlier that, quote, "So far, this Axios exclusive about the vanishing Epstein list remains alone in reportage." But as our other friends at the Gateway Pundit have asked, if there were no Epstein client lists, why did the New York court presiding over the case refuse their legal request for the list based on an anonymous John Doe who was on that list? The Gateway Pundit has joined us on the show to talk about their many requests that they now supposedly, the DOJ and FBI supposedly are saying doesn't exist. And why did Jeffrey Epstein maintain a sophisticated surveillance system that is well documented in his New York mansion to keep tabs on his rowdy rich guests if there was nothing to the claims that they were detailed files Epstein maintained for blackmail purposes? We've reached a point where either Axios is lying or Trump's people are covering up the truth. It cannot be both. No one from the administration has officially commented on the Axios reportage. We'll await with bated breath to see if the White House press secretary does in a short amount of time. And it remains to be seen if this report is true or not. All this is breaking, of course, when Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is coming for historic meetings with President Donald Trump at the White House, along with many key members of his administration. Now, I'm sure these two events are in no way connected, but we here at The Absolute Truth will keep continuing to keep a close eye on this most disturbing story. As I just noted, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu is meeting with President Donald Trump this week, starting with dinner tonight. And most media outlets are reporting that, quote, Netanyahu will be seeking a letter granting open-ended permission for Israel to continue carrying out attacks on Iran aimed at its nuclear and ballistic missile assets. They may shift more infrastructure, according to reports, to eastern Iran. In other words, Netanyahu wants unquestioning U.S. military support in implementing what they're calling the Lebanization strategy of Iran. But how does this Israeli request uphold President Trump's stated desire for peace negotiations and a nonviolent resolution to the current impasse in Israeli-Iranian affairs? To help get to the bottom of these matters and preview what we are likely to see from this meetings is our guest, Dr. Michael Schroer. He is the former head of the CIA's Bin Laden Task Force and an expert on geopolitics in the Middle East. Dr. Schroer, it's good to see you again. Clearly, lots of news developing surrounding Netanyahu's visit. We're finding out that he will speak to also Secretary of State Marco Rubio on this Monday, as well as have a meeting with Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff. What are your expectations as someone who watches this region very closely, Dr. Schroer?
Unfortunately, ma'am, I expect the Americans to go along with whatever he wants. It would be an amazing development, and I wish it, and I hope it happens. But for them to turn down whatever the Israeli Prime Minister wants, we are no more than the play toy of the Israelis. You want to know why that business about no list of people? It's because these Israelis and the CIA and MI6 were all involved in that adventure on Little St. James Island. But the president is faced with a situation where he doesn't have a declaration of war from the Congress. He took, as all other presidents since Truman have done, unconstitutional action by sending our forces into war. And now they want the power that the Congress supposedly delegated to the president to be in a letter given to them so they can do anything they want. It's a madness. The president shouldn't even let him into the White House. If that's the goal of what this is about. The Israelis are getting pounded, and I can't say that I'm sad about that. They've drawn us into so many problems. They've suborned Americans to spy for them. They've sold their technology to the Chinese, and yet we call them our greatest ally.
And just getting back to what you noted about the Epstein files, I wish we had this soundbite. I played it on the show in the past. I was at the White House on the South Lawn the day that President Trump bid farewell to his then Labor Secretary Alex Acosta, who had formerly been a prosecutor in Florida at the time all this Epstein mess was going about there. And he had said explicitly, well, he was told that Epstein was an intelligence asset, so it was hands off when he was explaining why he gave such a sweetheart deal to Epstein in his capacity there as U.S. attorney in Florida. You're saying that the Israelis are getting pounded, and that's one reason for Netanyahu's sudden visit to Washington, D.C. for 3 days of meetings. Now, the president, the White House, the Pentagon have all contended that, we all agree, and it goes without saying that we don't think Iran should have nuclear capabilities, right? Or at least that's what the American public responds when it comes to these polls that are often used. People agree to that. We were told, though, that Iran's weapons were obliterated by President Trump and his Secretary of Defense. Is that indeed the case in that last mission?
Well, they continue to claim it is, although they also publicized the names of the three positions they were going to attack quite a long time before the attack. Now, the Israelis the Iranians are many things, but they're not dumb people. They're very intelligent. They're very wary of the West. And if they left any substantial material behind, I would be surprised. But I'm not a nuclear expert. The one thing I keep hearing, though, is that there is no Nothing came up in the atmosphere after the attacks that signaled that there had been any kind of rupture of materials that were radioactive. So what they destroyed, I don't know. Whether they destroyed the Iranian nuclear program, I seriously doubt. And I think what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu wants is a signed letter to use our weapons or whatever we give them to kill Iranians like he kills Palestinians. That's just that's just exactly what he wants.
So I want to play a soundbite. President Trump says that he is willing to strike Iran again. Let's take a listen to what he recently said in regards to that possibility.
If the intelligence reports conclude that Iran can enrich uranium to a level that concerns you, would you consider bombing the country again?
Without question, absolutely.
Have you had any?
How should the president navigate this today, in your opinion, Dr. Sawyer?
Lock the doors. Don't let him into the White House. Give him a plane ticket back or take him back in a military aircraft. But they're not our friends, ma'am. We are dealing with the devil when we deal with them, not in a religious sense, but dealing with someone who is an enemy of the United States, not a supporter.
I have to ask you because, I mean, obviously President Trump isn't going to do that. Shouldn't we then try to get something out of it if he's going to go along with this? And I point to our persecuted brothers and sisters in Armenia. A lot of Americans aren't even aware of the situation there, right, where Azerbaijan has been constantly attacking Armenia, the Christians there, and the weapons are sold to them in large part by the Israelis. So if President Trump is going to help out Israel, should he not ask for Israel to stop at least selling weapons to Azerbaijan to be used against Christians in Armenia?
Well, we've never done it before, ma'am. All of our Middle East policies since the end of the Second World War have permitted, at times indirectly encouraged, the massacre of Christians. We just did it in the Syria business. We did it in Iraq. We did it in Egypt. We are amongst the enablers of people who want to kill Christians in the Middle East.
And Armenia is one of the oldest Christian populations, and people don't understand what's going on there.
Well, I don't understand what's going on here, ma'am. I'm not a big fellow that's concerned with what goes on overseas if it doesn't hurt us. And I think the road for America to return to a stature of solidity, of a social system that works and isn't at each other's throats, is to stop these wars. What have we gained from all of these wars since 1917? Nothing but responsibility, and unfortunately, a number of presidents who have been reckless and taking us into wars that like Iraq and Vietnam, for example. What have we got out of it? I think the time to go back to the Constitution, and no wars without a formal declaration. And then put those darn congressmen and senators right on the spot because it's their responsibility.
Yeah, they can slide out of it a little bit easy with the current status quo of going about these operations. And look, President Trump's base largely voted for no more conflicts. And that's, what they assumed they were getting, because that's what we got in the first term. And he has long prided himself and noted that he was the president who involved us in no more conflicts in his first term, and was, really the impetus for a responsible departure from Afghanistan. Now, that didn't play out that way in the Biden years, right? But he was trying to engage in an exit from Afghanistan. We will see. We will see. He does often listen to public pressure, so we will see how that plays into Netanyahu's visit, and we'll talk to you later in the week after we have more information about how it goes about, and we can analyze what actually happens instead of speculating on what's going to happen. It's good to see you, Dr. Sawyer. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, ma'am.
The DOJ and FBI have now concluded there was no Jeffrey Epstein client list. What do you tell MAGA supporters who say they want anyone involved in Jeffrey Epstein's alleged crimes to be held accountable?
This administration wants anyone who has ever committed a crime to be held accountable, and I would argue this administration has done more to lock up bad guys than certainly the previous administration. And the Trump administration is committed to truth and to transparency. That's why the Attorney General and the FBI Director pledged at the President's direction to do an exhaustive review of all of the files related to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes and his death. And they put out a memo in conclusion of that review. There was material they did not release because, frankly, it was incredibly graphic and it contained child pornography, which is not something that's appropriate for public consumption. But they committed to an exhaustive investigation. That's what they did, and they provided the results of that. That's transparency.
Follow up on that,
Sure.
Caroline. Okay, so the FBI looks at the circumstances surrounding the death of Jeffrey Epstein. According to the report, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network on Fox News.
Got the quote.
Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than committed to ensuring that bad people are put behind bars. They have an operation going on right now called Summer Heat, which has our murder rate trending in the lowest direction in United States history. Their emphasis on violent crime and locking up violent criminals has led to the arrest of 14,000 violent criminals. That's a 62% increase from the same time period last year. So this Attorney General and the FBI Director are committed to putting bad people behind bars where they belong. They promised an exhaustive review. That's what they did. For any further details, I would refer you to the Department of Justice.
And the DOJ has now confirmed the Axios reporting as well. In a move that has caught many Trump supporters by surprise, especially those probably who were on social media calling it fake news earlier today, the White House confirmed the Axios reporting, suggesting that no evidence exists that Jeffrey Epstein ran a blackmail operation, according to the Trump DOJ and FBI. And Caroline Leavitt taking it even further, stating that the review is, quote, unquote, closed. Well, if that's the case, why did the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, have at least 36 meetings with convicted pedophile blackmailer Jeffrey Epstein from 2013 to 2017? Why did they meet every month in 2016? Are we still trying to figure out who Epstein really worked for? Dr. Michael Scheuer dropped this bomb earlier on The Absolute Truth.
We are no more than the play toy of the Israelis. You want to know why that business about no list of people? It's because these Israelis and the CIA and MI6 were all involved in that adventure on Little St. James Island.
And back not so long ago, the now FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino seemed to also know who Epstein worked for.
About a year and a half after that, I'm in a green room at Fox, and I'm not going to say who because they didn't give me permission to share it, but well, the short story, but not who they are. It says, you know, Epstein's an intelligence asset for people in the Middle East, right? I'm like, no, I didn't know that. I'm like, you sure of that? The person, let's say, is like, I'm absolutely sure of that. That he's either a witting or unwitting asset, intelligence asset, meaning his plane and that island, the cameras, there's a big assumption out there that these videotapes were exclusively in the custody of Epstein. That's a huge mistake. The reason they wanted this story to go away is because there's an assumption like, oh yeah, Epstein had him. No, he wasn't the only one who had him, according to this source. These assets, that's why this blackmail story makes so much sense. Which Middle Eastern countries they are, I don't know. But this person, who is a very, very good reporter, I mean, aces, right, swore Epstein was either a witting or unwitting intelligence asset, and they may have had his plane wired up, and they're the ones who have all this stuff. So the point is, to sum it up, How do you know some of these countries aren't going to some of these power players who aren't making decisions? Because, hey, you wouldn't want this video out there, right? How do you know?
100%.
I mean,
let's get
How times change when you work for the swamp. So if Epstein's homes were full of video recording devices in every room, which is well documented, as you heard Bongino say back then on Timcast, and he throws parties with famous people and underage girls. And he tells people he's got dirt on famous men, and the FBI covers for him when he gets caught. And now that's the FBI under the leadership of Dan Bongino himself. Where does that leave us? So if you're keeping score, the FBI has the Epstein tapes, because that's been well reported in the past. They have the Anthony Weiner laptop. They also have the Seth Rich laptop. I wouldn't call that transparency. Allison Steinberg joins us now from the White House for much more on this latest news. I mean, I wonder how the people who were out there on social media saying, oh, this has to be fake news, how they feel now with Caroline Leavitt confirming it in the briefing room. Did that seem to be a shock to people in the briefing room? Because I don't think they really I didn't expect that. I guess I didn't expect that just answer from her.
Yeah, it was a bit shocking for me, at least, who was watching and waiting for a transparent answer, right? Because this administration prides themselves on being the most transparent in history, which I guess is true in some regards. They have been, in various other aspects. But with this, no, it's a total bust, and it's a massive letdown to every American citizen, regardless of what end of the political spectrum you're on, by the way. I think we just need transparency here, and we need real answers. We know that there is so much more to this story than is being disclosed. Nothing is adding up here. I mean, Pam Bondi herself said not long ago, what was it, just a matter of a couple of weeks, said she had truckloads of information on her desk, and she was sifting through it all, and that would soon be revealed to the American public. And now it's just crickets, case closed, end of story. There was no list. There was, Epstein just, killed himself, and that's the end of the story, and we're not allowed to ask any further questions. The fact that Caroline Leavitt didn't even entertain any alternative thought on this topic today in the briefing room, I think speaks volumes and is very, again, disappointing to every American who had some hope in this case. We saw the binder stunt with all of the influencers who came to the White House to get the reveal of all of the Epstein information, which was once again another total bust. And then, we thought, oh, maybe we wait a few more months, something big is coming. Nope, just letdown after letdown as far as the Epstein files are concerned. And you really have to wonder, because namely Dan Bongino and even Kash Patel has been very vocal on this topic in many times in the past, as you highlighted on your show moments ago, the fact that they are now covering this up and refusing to even comment on it is very telling. I think we need to continue to put the pressure on and demand answers here, because this is not sufficient.
Well, it's the contradictions, Allison, as you noted. It's what Bondi has said in her official capacity. This is not even when she was out there just talking head on TV. This is her official capacity as the Attorney General of the United States, saying explicitly that the files are on her desk, that there are a truckload, and it's so bad, it's so terrible. And even Caroline Leavitt in the White House briefing room saying, oh, well, that it involves child pornography. It's the contradictions. And it's Alex Acosta, the former labor secretary under the first term, saying that he was told when he was a U.S. attorney that Epstein was an intelligence asset. It's on the campaign trail. All of these people, Kash, Bongino, Trump, saying we need to see the Epstein files. And then it's just such cognitive dissonance. We'll see if President Trump will address it. We're a little bit short on time now, so I do want to get to the next issue, because there's another battle brewing in the Trump administration. This is with the U.S. the Agriculture Secretary, Brooke Rollins, who has obviously also picked a fight a little bit with the base, who is concerned about some of these agriculture issues. Trump acknowledged that she is the one who suggested that farmers need illegal labor. Correct? Where does that stand today?
Yeah, that is correct. And I wish there was a question that was asked about that in the briefing. Nothing was addressed on that front today. But this is an extremely alarming issue, right up there with the Epstein files. I think this is a massive slap in the face to every American because, as we know, Trump campaigned on mass deportations. How are you going to sit there and make excuses to keep illegal farmers and hotel workers in the country? That is unacceptable. This is not what we were promised. So no, this and he keeps changing his tune on it too, right? He said this a few weeks ago, went back on it, and now he's back again. So what's going on here?
I think that issue will come up. There's a lot going on today. I know you're going to ask questions on this. It's a very important one. We're about to run out of time. I do know that several former Trump administrations officials are pushing Trump to go back again to where the base wants him to be on that. Thank you, Allison Steinberg. That's it for this hour of The Absolute Truth. I'm going to leave you with this verse, Psalm 118:8. It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man. In the meantime, keep the families and victims of the Texas flood in your prayers. That's The Absolute Truth. I'll see you tomorrow.